There's something viscerally wrong about seeing your garage open when you know you locked it tight, and your '67 Mustang, the one with federal evidence tags, still hanging from the mirror? Gone. Minutes later, HOA Karen rolls by in my car, grinning like Cruella de Vil at a Dalmatian auction. What she didn't know: that car was part of an ongoing DEA sting operation, and she just committed grand theft from federal custody. And no, this isn't a movie. This is what happens when a Karen-backed fake HOA plays militia in the wrong neighborhood. Freeze frame, yep. That's me. The guy whose private well HOA Karen tapped into to illegally water her garden. What did I do? I flushed her system with sewage. And oh buddy, that was just the beginning. You're probably wondering how this suburban Cold War even started. Honestly, I was just trying to mind my own business. I'd inherited my late uncle's old property after he got scooped up in a multi-agency sting, which I only found out about after his funeral when 2 DEA agents showed up to tell me I was now sitting on a hotbed of frozen asset. Apparently, Uncle Randy liked to party and traffic controlled substances across state lines. He also liked vintage cars, specifically a deep cherry red 1967 Mustang Fastback. The car was beautiful, untouched, pristine, and also very much off-limit. I was under strict instructions. Do not sell it, drive it, or even so much as start the engine. The car was being monitored. I could keep it in the garage, but touching it was a no-go. Still, it looked amazing just sitting there. And that, unfortunately, was enough to piss off Karen. Now, I didn't realize I had moved into the suburban equivalent of the Hunger Games. My street had something called a Heritage Neighborhood Committee, which sounds like a glorified knitting club until you realize they'd rebranded a dissolved HOA and decided to enforce old rules with new attitude. At the helm of this lawless bureaucracy? Karen Witherspoon, president, judge, jury, and wannabe neighborhood sheriff. She didn't like unsanctioned garages, cars that weren't registered with her little coven, or people who looked like they don't belong. Apparently, I checked all 3 boxes. At first, it was just the notes. Folded paper on my door with phrases like, HOA Vehicle Code Section 12.4.2 violation, written in all caps, with excessive underlining and no legal merit whatsoever. I ignored them. I figured eventually she'd get bored, or find someone else to harass. But Karen? Karen doesn't get bored. Karen escalates. One morning, I found my mailbox stuffed with community warnings, along with a glossy pamphlet she must have had custom printed. On the cover, a photo of my garage, the Mustang's rear bumper barely visible. Inside, a rant about how unregistered vehicles attract criminal behavior and lower neighborhood property values. It was like reading a badly researched Reddit post, only with more font changes and 3 separate clipart illustrations of broken windows. So I decided to talk to her, or at least try. I walked over one afternoon while she was pruning her hydrangeas like she was preparing them for war, and said as calmly as I could, Karen, that Mustang is federal property. It's evidence. I can't move it, sell it, or drive it. She didn't even look up from her shears. Then it shouldn't be in a residential neighborhood. It's in my garage. Visible from the street. It's not visible unless you're actively trespassing into my driveway. She gave me that smile. You know the one, tight-lipped, like she's holding in the urge to spit directly on your shoes. We'll see what the board has to say. There is no board, by the way. But Karen had long since decided that facts were optional. Over the next few weeks, the passive aggression turned tactical. She started photographing my house daily. One time, I caught her measuring the length of my grass with a ruler. Another time, she left a note demanding I relocate the vehicle to an appropriate storage facility or face corrective towing. That's when I installed a security camera over the garage. Not just because of Karen, but because the DEA had subtly suggested that certain people might come looking for that Mustang. I wasn't supposed to move it, but I was allowed to keep an eye on it. Turns out, that decision saved me. It was a Tuesday. I'd gone out for 30 minutes. Came back with 2 bags of groceries and an iced coffee. And the second I pulled into the driveway, my stomach dropped. Garage door wide open. Lock cut. Chain dangling. Mustang gone. For a full 5 seconds I thought I was hallucinating. I dropped the groceries. Eggs splattered. My drink hit the concrete. My legs moved before my brain did, rushing to the garage. Nothing. No broken glass, no debris, just clean concrete and a sense of doom. Then I heard it. The faint, unmistakable purr of my Mustang's engine. It was coming down the street. And there she was. Karen. In my car. Sitting tall, sunglasses on, her perfectly styled bob fluttering in the wind. She waved like this was all perfectly reasonable. Like she hadn't just committed felony theft. The smile on her face was pure smugness marinated in delusion. I was too stunned to speak. She pulled into her driveway across the street like she was returning from the Hamptons. Parked the Mustang. Got out. Wiped a smudge from the fender. Then, as if to add insult to injury, she peeled a sticker off her Lexus and slapped it onto the Mustang's windshield. It read, "Approved HOA vehicle." I walked back inside in silence, breathing hard, every neuron in my brain lighting up like fireworks. I pulled up the security cam footage on my phone. There she was, broad daylight, bolt cutters in hand, breaking the lock, calling a towing company she clearly had on speed dial. She even left a handwritten note inside the garage, taped to the wall. "You're welcome. Eyesores aren't allowed here." I didn't even call the cops. I called the DEA. The agent on the other end of the line didn't swear, but you could hear it in his voice. "She what?" I emailed over the footage, the photos, the timestamp, the note. He told me to sit tight, not to confront her, and that someone would be in touch very soon. Turns out, Karen hadn't just stolen a car. She had interfered with an active federal operation. That Mustang wasn't just under surveillance, it was wired. Tracked. Tagged. Still held trace evidence from the last sting it was used in. And Karen Witherspoon just drove it into her driveway like she was auditioning for a Fast and Furious HOA edition. I stared out the window at the Mustang across the street, heart pounding. The car looked smaller now. Or maybe it was just the weight of the stupidity pressing down on it. That's when I noticed something else. She had the hood popped open. She was tinkering. She was about to sell it. Or worse, she already had. And that's when I realized, this wasn't just about my car anymore. This was about to become a federal circus. I didn't sleep that night. Not because I was afraid of what Karen might do next. Because I was afraid of what the DEA might. They don't exactly have a reputation for patience or a sense of humor, especially when their evidence gets stolen by a suburban dictator with a topiary obsession. I sat in the dark, lights off, watching her house from my window like I was in a spy movie. Except I wasn't the agent. I was the idiot neighbor who let the Fed's bait car get jacked by a woman who once fined a teenager for having a basketball hoop in the driveway. Around 6 a.m., I saw a white van roll slowly down the block. It didn't stop, didn't speed up, just coasted past her house and disappeared around the corner. 10 minutes later, another one did the same thing. No logos, tinted windows. They didn't belong to anyone on this street and in this neighborhood. I know that because Karen makes sure we all know who belongs. Which meant only one thing: the DEA had arrived. Later that morning, I got a call from an agent named Langford. He was polite in the way that someone holding a loaded weapon is polite. Firm. Efficient. He thanked me for my cooperation, then asked if I could maintain normal behavior for the next few days. His words. I said I'd do my best, but if Karen tried to tow my mailbox or issue me a fine for owning socks in the wrong shade of gray, all bets were off. He chuckled once, then his tone flattened. We need her to feel untouchable. She's already crossed a line. The goal now is to see how far she's willing to go. So that was the plan. Let Karen dig her own grave. And oh, did she grab a shovel. That afternoon, she held an emergency HOA meeting in her backyard. Now, this wasn't an actual HOA with any legal authority. It was more like a cosplay HOA, a power trip she kept alive through sheer will, intimidation, and a group of bored retirees who liked the illusion of governance. I attended, purely to play the dumb neighbor. I wore a touristy shirt, flip-flops, and brought a cooler of sparkling water to share. She glared at me the whole time. She opened the meeting with, and I quote, "We have successfully removed a neighborhood blight." Her exact words. She even had a little slideshow, yes, a PowerPoint, showing the Mustang before and after it had been rescued. There was applause. Some nods. A few confused glances from neighbors who didn't even know it was gone. Karen basked in the attention like she'd just solved world hunger. Then came the kicker. She said she had found a new home for the vehicle. That it had already been picked up by a collector who truly appreciates heritage. My jaw clenched so hard I nearly cracked a molar. She had sold it. Sold a DEA-tagged car. To some mystery collector. Possibly out of state. Possibly out of the country. She was grinning like a cat with feathers in its mouth. I kept sipping my sparkling water like it was tea made of gasoline. I didn't need to say anything. I'd brought my phone and a discreet lav mic, hidden in a pocket in my cooler. Everything she said was being recorded. The audio was crystal clear. Her bragging was loud enough to carry across the lawn. Langford was going to love this. After the meeting, I went home and uploaded the recording to the secure DEA portal they'd set up for me. 10 minutes later, Langford called again. "She's toast," he said. The plan now was surveillance. Full-on, around-the-clock observation. Apparently, the collector Karen sold the Mustang to was on a list, suspected of money laundering through fake classic car deals. The Mustang, in all its illegal glory, was going to act like a glowing neon arrow pointing right into their operation. But of course, while the DEA played their long game, I needed something a little more personal. Karen had declared war. She had crossed property lines, broken locks, stolen federal evidence, and now she was walking around like she was queen of the cul-de-sac. So I did what any reasonable person would do. I started my own quiet campaign. First, I reported her for illegal landscaping. She'd added a decorative stone path that extended 6 inches past her property line. Code violation. The city slapped her with a warning. She blamed me at the next HOA meeting, but I just smiled and said, "I thought it looked lovely." Such a shame when people don't appreciate it legally. Next, I filed a noise complaint. Not a loud party, oh no. Karen had an old water fountain in her front yard that gurgled day and night like it was trying to summon Poseidon. Turns out, the pump she was using was above the legal decibel limit for residential zones. Another citation. Then came the best one. Her Lexus, her pride and joy, had aftermarket window tint that was slightly too dark. I called it in anonymously. She got pulled over right outside her own house. The look on her face was pure gold, confused, angry, indignant. I watched from behind a curtain, sipping coffee like a villain in a soap opera. Petty? Sure. Satisfying? Deeply. But none of it compared to what happened next. 2 nights later, I saw flashing lights outside her house. Not sirens. Just silent strobing. Unmarked cars. Agents in dark jackets. Langford had said they'd move fast if the collector made a move, and apparently he had. They'd tracked the Mustang, followed it through a shady transaction, and now they were back to trace the chain of custody. Which meant Karen was officially in the crosshairs. The next morning, she was unusually quiet. No gardening. No passive-aggressive sweeping of imaginary leaves onto my driveway. Just silence. Then, around noon, I saw her step out in full suburban warrior mode, hair perfect, clipboard in hand, and march down the street to gather signatures for a new HOA bylaw about preventing suspicious vehicle storage. She was still pretending she had control. Still pretending the neighborhood belonged to her. And then she did something unbelievably stupid. She walked right up to my door, knocked, and said, "You'll be receiving a new fine." We've decided any unapproved repairs visible from the garage are in violation of neighborhood aesthetics. I looked at her, calmly, smiled. You mean the garage you broke into? She blinked. Excuse me. You left a note. With your handwriting. I still have it. Would you like a copy? For a brief second I saw it. That flicker of doubt. A crack in the armor. But she covered it quickly. I have the full support of the HOA board, she snapped. And I have the full support of the federal government, I said, and then slowly closed the door in her face. Behind me my phone buzzed. A message from Langford. Short. Simple. We've got her. And just when I thought things couldn't get more insane, I got another message. From a neighbor I barely knew. Apparently, Karen had been dipping into the HOA funds. For years. And someone had the receipts. It started unraveling faster than I expected. One moment, Karen was still strutting around the neighborhood like a suburban Caesar in yoga pants, and the next, she was being whispered about by the very people who once worshipped her like she invented lawn care. It wasn't just the car anymore. That was just the match. The gasoline was everything else. Her fake authority, her misuse of neighborhood funds, her pathological need to control every square inch of a place she didn't even technically own. And now, the whispers were turning into calls. The neighbor who reached out to me, Tina, retired CPA, professional tea spiller, invited me over for what she called a little chat about the monster across the street. What I got instead was a full-blown forensic audit of Karen's amateur empire. Tina had records, emails, HOA meeting notes, bank statements that didn't add up, years of financial funny business disguised as beautification initiatives. Turns out, Karen had been redirecting funds from the neighborhood dues, technically optional, but paid by most under social pressure, into a private checking account she controlled under the name Community Enrichment and Planning Fund. She used it to pay for her landscaping, a new patio, and even part of her daughter's wedding. The wedding that, by the way, had a no-jeans dress code and a shrimp tower flown in from Miami. I stared at the stack of evidence and asked Tina the only reasonable question left. Why hadn't anyone said anything sooner? She sipped her coffee with a look of pure, quiet judgment. Because she's scared people. But now she's scared, and people can smell it. That same day, I passed all of Tina's documents along to Agent Langford. He didn't sound surprised. Just tired, like this kind of stupidity was his Tuesday. He said it would help build their case. The federal charges were already stacking up: grand theft, interference with an active federal operation, unauthorized sale of seized property. Now with potential fraud and financial misconduct added, Karen wasn't just looking at handcuffs. She was looking at orange jumpsuits and lawyer fees stacked higher than her HOA newsletters. Still, the feds moved in silence. No sudden arrests. No dramatic scenes. They were waiting for the perfect moment. And they got it. Karen had organized a classic Americana day on the neighborhood green space. A little festival where she planned to unveil her contribution to community heritage. She didn't say what the contribution was, but based on the smug way she dropped hints about vintage beauty and restored legacies, I knew exactly what was coming. She was going to bring the Mustang. She was going to make it the centerpiece of her fake car show. She was going to parade stolen federal evidence in front of half the neighborhood like it was a damn trophy. I showed up early, lawn chair in hand, sunglasses on, trying to keep my expression neutral. The green was packed. Folding chairs, kids with balloon swords, the works. Karen strutted up onto the little makeshift stage they'd built next to the lemonade stand, microphone in hand, pearls gleaming in the sunlight. Today, she announced, we honor the spirit of American craftsmanship, the power of restoration, and the beauty of a well-kept community. I almost applauded. Not because I agreed, but because she was delivering the opening monologue of her own doom with Oscar-worthy confidence. Then she motioned for the Mustang to be brought forward. A young guy drove it up, early 20s, clearly clueless about what he was touching. Karen waved dramatically. This car was neglected, abandoned, and nearly ruined. But I saw its potential. And now, thanks to the right buyer and a little love, it's back where it belongs, in the hands of people who appreciate its value. She turned and looked directly at me. That same smirk. That same dead-eyed pride. And that's when three men in dark suits stepped onto the stage. Agent Langford was in the middle, badge in hand. The crowd went quiet. Karen blinked once, then twice. Confused. Then annoyed. Then terrified. Langford spoke clearly, no mic needed. Karen Witherspoon, you are under federal investigation for the theft and sale of government-seized property, obstruction of a federal operation, and fraud. Please come with us. Karen laughed. An actual laugh. This is absurd, she said. I'm the president of this community. Langford raised an eyebrow. And now you're about to be a very special guest of the state. Two other agents stepped forward. Karen tried to back up, but the Mustang was behind her. She had nowhere to go. The young guy who'd driven the car looked like he was about to pass out. One of the agents gently guided him away from the vehicle, and another opened the driver's side door to inspect the interior. Karen's face changed then. It stopped being about pride or control. It was panic. Real, pure panic. She started shouting about conspiracies, about people setting her up, about how the real crime was letting people like him live here, motioning toward me like I'd personally cursed her flowerbed. As she was led away, handcuffed and flanked by agents, she kept screaming. I did this for the neighborhood. For all of you. You're welcome. Nobody clapped. A few people looked away. One guy muttered, well, that explains the shrimp tower. The fallout was nuclear. Within 48 hours, the fake HOA was functionally dead. The board resigned en masse. A new committee was formed, this time a legally registered, transparent, and limited organization that actually respected property boundaries and didn't fine people for wind chimes. Tina was nominated as the new treasurer. She accepted with a smile that could cut granite. The Mustang was taken back into federal custody temporarily, pending a full investigation. But Langford told me, off the record, that it was likely to be returned. We don't need it anymore, he said. You helped us get what we really wanted. And besides, it's not like she can sell it again. I spent the evening watching the news report. Karen's mugshot was already circulating online, paired with dramatic headlines like HOA Queen arrested in DEA sting and local woman sells federal evidence, blames community. Her face, once the symbol of control on our street, was now the subject of national ridicule. Memes were being made. People were commenting things like, she looks like the type to ask for the manager of the FBI. I didn't gloat. Not publicly. But inside? Oh, inside, I was basking in a level of schadenfreude that could power a small city. And just when I thought the dust was settling, just when I thought the final chapter had been written, I got a letter. Not an email. Not a knock at the door. A real, old-fashioned, handwritten letter delivered by certified mail. Return address: a federal detention center. The envelope was pink. The handwriting, unmistakably Karen's. I opened it, expecting an apology, or maybe a final tirade. What I got instead was a spiral into madness. She accused me of setting her up. Said I'd baited her with the car. That I knew all along it would get her in trouble, and that I weaponized the law against her. She demanded I advocate for her release, claiming we were both victims of a broken system. I read the whole thing twice. Then I folded it neatly, slid it into a drawer, and poured myself a drink. Because somehow, even behind bars, Karen still couldn't grasp the one simple truth that started it all. She stole the wrong car. From the wrong garage. At the wrong time. It took about 3 weeks for the dust to truly settle. The neighborhood was quieter now, not in a somber way, but in that strange post-drama calm where everyone's just a little more polite, a little more humble, and definitely not trying to run illegal HOA empires from their garden sheds. Karen's arrest had shaken the whole block like an earthquake. For a few days, no one made eye contact. Then, slowly, people started smiling again, waving. Dogs weren't mysteriously barked at through fences. Lawns weren't obsessively measured. The whole place felt relaxed. Which is wild, considering we had just survived what was basically a federal sting operation disguised as a petty neighbor dispute. I got the call from Langford late one Friday. He said they were officially wrapping up the case. Charges had been filed. Plea deals were already being floated. Karen was facing multiple felonies, and while the government didn't expect to get much money out of her, turns out embezzling HOA dues doesn't make you rich. They were satisfied with the outcome. The collector she sold the Mustang to was going to trial. And as for the car itself? Langford said the DEA had finished with it. All devices removed, all evidence processed. He paused for a second, then said, "We'd like to return it to you. Consider it a thank you." I nearly dropped my phone. "You're giving it back?" Langford chuckled. "You kept it safe. Until Karen didn't. But you helped us close a case we've been chasing for a while. The paperwork's done. The car is yours, clean and clear." 2 days later, a flatbed truck pulled into my driveway carrying the Mustang. It looked exactly the same, glossy cherry red, chrome shining like a mirror, and those iconic black stripes running down the hood. They'd even left the federal evidence tag dangling from the rearview mirror, laminated and all. A little souvenir, I guess. The driver handed me the keys and a clipboard. I signed my name, took the keys, and for the first time in over a year, I opened the door and sat in the driver's seat without feeling like I was going to be tackled by federal agents. It started on the first try. The engine purred like a beast waking from hibernation. I just sat there for a while, letting the rumble fill the garage, feeling that quiet satisfaction you only get when things finally fall into place. The car wasn't just a car anymore. It was a victory trophy. A rolling monument to everything I'd put up with and overcome. A few hours later, as if on cue, a few neighbors came by. Not to complain. Just to admire the car. One of them brought beer. Another brought cookies. Someone asked if I'd consider entering it in the local vintage show. I told them I'd think about it, which really meant, absolutely, and I hope the judges read the news. Then, a week later, another letter arrived. Same handwriting. Same pink envelope. Karen again. This one wasn't handwritten. It was typed. 2 pages. Titled, "An Open Letter to My Former Community." It was a bizarre blend of apology, manifesto, and victimhood. She opened with a vague acknowledgement that mistakes were made, blamed stress, menopause, and government overreach, then pivoted to accusing half the neighborhood of betrayal. She insisted that her only crime was caring too much, and that if people had just followed the rules, none of this would have happened. The final paragraph asked for forgiveness and hinted that she might return someday, stronger and wiser. I read it 3 times, mostly in disbelief. Then I passed it around the neighborhood like a cursed object from a horror movie. Everyone had the same reaction, uncomfortable laughter followed by a unanimous, "Nope." Karen wasn't coming back. And even if she did, the new HOA, this time legal, registered, and appropriately boring, would never let her within 50 feet of the bylaws. Tina was doing a fantastic job as treasurer, and the new president, Rob, had already overturned every absurd policy Karen had forced through. The ridiculous car fines? Gone. The grass height regulations? Normalized. The community aesthetic standards that somehow always targeted the same 4 houses? Deleted. In their place, we had transparency, monthly open meetings, and a neighborhood group chat that was mostly pet photos and event reminders. Honestly, it was almost unsettling how normal everything had become. And yet, I didn't let my guard down completely. I installed a second camera over the garage, this one hidden behind a motion-activated owl statue. Just in case. The Mustang was parked proudly in the driveway now, because I could finally do that without fear of suburban warfare. One evening, as I was polishing the fender, I heard footsteps. I turned and saw Mrs. Elderly from 2 houses down, the one who used to scowl every time I so much as breathed near a leaf blower. She stood there for a moment, then said, "You know, I always thought you were the troublemaker." I paused, unsure where this was going. "And now?" She smiled. It was small, but genuine. "Now I think you're just the guy who brought peace to the neighborhood with a classic car and a whole lot of patience." High praise, coming from someone who once reported a garden gnome as visual clutter. After she left, I leaned against the car and thought about everything that had happened. The chaos. The fines. The break-in. The federal agents. Karen's face when she realized the Mustang was a trap. It all felt surreal, like something out of a Netflix docuseries. And maybe one day someone would dramatize it. But for now it was just my life. Quieter. Calmer. With a lot more horsepower. I took the Mustang for a drive that night. Just a slow cruise around town. Windows down, radio on. People wave. Kids pointed. A few car guys gave the classic two-finger salute as I passed. I felt good. Free. And maybe just a little bit smug. As I pulled back into the driveway, headlights caught something on the porch. A package. No return label. Just a small box wrapped in brown paper. I picked it up, opened it, and found a single object inside. A bolt cutter. The same kind that had been used on my garage lock. No note. No explanation. I looked around, scanning the dark. Nothing. No shadows, no footsteps, no movement. Maybe it was a joke. A prank by a neighbor with a twisted sense of humor. Or maybe Karen, from her cell, had somehow orchestrated one last petty jab. Who knows? But I held it up, turned it in my hand, and then calmly walked over to the trash bin and dropped it in. Because in the end, that bolt cutter didn't break me. It started the chain reaction that burned her fake empire to the ground. And me? I got my car, my peace, and my neighborhood back. So let that be the final lesson. You can break a lock. You can steal a car. You can even pretend to rule a street. But sooner or later, someone's going to put you in your place. And sometimes they'll do it with nothing more than a camera, a Mustang, and a whole lot of petty revenge.